I'm going to put it to you real simple like this. Most of sponsorship people go after the top two people. A's taking care, she got plenty of stuff going on. KP got plenty of stuff. In this situation, from what I understand, is they wanted the whole team. So they went and called individuals, agents. I don't know the detail. I have nothing to do with it. The Aces don't have anything to do with it. It's just odd, but that's basically what happened.
Asia, can you explain it just from a player's standpoint, how that, because we were sort of told that like they did come to your individual agents and do that. Can you maybe just explain how that whole process went down?
Yeah, I mean, our agents even kind of kept it to us because they really wanted us to hear from them. I think we get brought things from our agents all the time. So they wanted it to be a big moment because it's something that's never happened before. So I don't understand the investigation. I haven't really dived into it yet. I just looked at my phone and was like, oh wow, just another day in the life of the Aces. We can't ever start just normal. It's always going to be something, and that's okay. But when we're talking about growing the game, when we're talking about taking that next step, it can't always be investigate. It has to kind of be like, okay, we're trying to move the needle. We're trying to make things better for franchises, for players, for teams. So it's still a question mark to me, but on the player side from it, I'm super grateful to be in a franchise in a city that constantly wants more out of us, that wants us to just don't worry about stuff, just go play and go win and have fun in that. So I'm blessed with or without the 100K, because at the end of the day, we're going for something bigger than that, and we're going to continue to do that, continue to be us, and we can't really listen to this outside noise going on.
Welcome, Callie Lawson Freeman. That was the team that you cover talking, Becky Hammon and Asia Wilson. And that was after their game over the weekend where they just played a game, got a nice win, and then they had to react to news that came out while they were playing the game that apparently the Aces are going to be investigated or are being investigated. And it's for, I want to be very careful with my phrasing here. It is for $100,000 sponsorships that they receive for each player on the team. Mm-hmm. But they're being investigated, or it's reported, sources close to the Next Hoops is reporting this. So their sources are saying that the league is going to conduct an investigation based on the quote unquote bonus payment. And so there seems to be a conflict in terms of what was reported by you in terms of what this payment was supposed to be, but also when the announcement came out, because it was categorized and announced as a sponsorship, and it was said that all of the players' agents had been contacted about this, and there was a big announcement. It was in the locker room. It was, what's the name of the entity? The Las Vegas.
It's the LVCVA. Essentially, the Las Vegas Tourism Authority is the best way to for the scope of this conversation.
Right. So there you go. So this award was presented to the, not award, but sponsorship, the announcement of it. And we were excited when the news first came out. When I say we, I'm saying the general public, I thought at large. Based on the reaction I was seeing on social media, people were like, yes, great. This is how you do it. This is how you invest in women. So there was excitement around this. But I'll tell you, Callie, a little bit later, I personally started getting questions. People were coming to me like, is this okay? Is this permissible? And I was perplexed. I was genuinely perplexed. I'm just like, players get sponsorships all the time. Why is this a question? Like, yes, it's for all of the players, but it's still a sponsorship. So why are we questioning a sponsorship to the Aces, Callie? Can you please shed some light on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the reality is that the Aces are continuously moving the needle, you know, from their brand new stadium. There were questions like, how are they able to do that? It's because they have an owner in Mark Davis that wants to invest in these players when Becky Hammon got her $1 million contract, there were questions about that. I mean, I just wrote today about how they utilize media. So many of the aces go on TV, they have their own shows. Like they're at the cutting edge of what it looks like to be a WNBA team. And with that comes a lot of speculation. Obviously, Asia and Becky kind of alluded to this in their post-game comments, like we can't ever start normal because last year around this time, they were being sanctioned for what the WNBA said they found was circumvention, impermissible benefits given to players. And to this day, it's still unclear exactly who those benefits were involving. There was speculation that maybe it was Candace Parker, but then at the same time, there was a investigation into the handling of Dearica Hamby and her being traded while pregnant. So some people thought the impermissible benefits were involving her. I don't think that's the case. But the reality is that the CBA does not allow for players to get paid by third parties for basketball services. And so I think that Steve Hill, the president and CEO of the LVCBA, who I spoke to a few times, in his speech in the locker room, he did say all you have to do is play and represent Las Vegas, continue to represent Las Vegas. And so I think that that could be what raised an eyebrow for the WNBA, but I understand the frustration from fans and even for the aces for the WNBA to go ahead and leak to reporters. I mean, they confirmed it to me that they are investigating. That's really not the most ideal way to communicate something like this, especially while they're playing a game. I think there were so many other ways to navigate this. They could have, I mean, I reached out to WNBA for comment immediately after the sponsorship offers were announced, and they declined to comment. So it's like, if you can't comment on it at the time and say anything positive or just like to any effect, but the next thing you know, you're investigating, I think the optics are poor. And so I think that that's the biggest issue. If you even like link it to their charter flight program, they suffered from the same issue. You know, Kathy Engelbert, WNBA commissioner, she went out and was like, hey, charter flights are going to be out, you know, this coming season. And then boom, they weren't, you know what I mean? They were only allowed for, what was it? The Fever
and the Lynx.
The Fever and the Lynx. So that's, you know, we're talking about unfair competitive advantage potentially. That is an example of that. That's what they are investigating the aces for. That's what the aces are continuously coming under question for, is unfair advantage. And
what's the unfair advantage? What's the unfair advantage in terms of on the court? How does this advantage them over another team?
Yeah, I mean, so I will tell you what I think the concerns are. I'm not saying that I think that this is the advantage, but this is what I understand that the league is concerned about, is that if you have potentially a sponsorship deal where every single player on the team is getting $100,000, it almost becomes a part of the salary for the team. Now, this, I don't necessarily agree. I think that these are clearly individual sponsorship offers, which is what I reported. And so I think, let's just clarify that. I think that the language of bonus payments, that's definitely a choice to kind of represent something that I don't think is the case. So I do want to clarify that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have reported it as sponsorship offers. I'm just saying, I think what the league is now investigating is that it does get, if you can say every single player on this team is going to get $100,000 from the Las Vegas Tourism Authority for being a part of this team, when you come to free agency, when you get to situations like that, when you're dealing with contracts, players might be more amenable to taking less money. Again, I don't have an issue with it, but I think that this is what the league is looking into. They're curious if it gives the WNBA, if it gives the aces an unfair advantage in that sense, like maybe, you know, securing more talent, whatever. To me, this is an example of get your money up, not your funny up. If you have a problem with it, you might have a tourism authority in your city. You might have a business who can, you know, match this bag. Like, I don't think that it should be something against the aces. From my reporting, I feel very, very confident that these sponsorship offers are going to stand. Everything that I've looked into, I don't see a way that the WNBA could rationally kind of impede this business deal, because that's what it is. It's a business deal with 12 individual athletes. Like the LVCVA,
And their
they went
agents. And
and
their
their agents.
agents,
Like,
which
yeah, I
he
want to
did
clarify too.
he
Yeah,
did say that in the video though, right?
right.
He
Yeah, he said it in the
indicated
video.
that they spoke to each player's agents,
Right.
and you reported that and broke down how everything was done.
Right.
And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's just the lawyer in me, not that
Right.
interrupts you, but it's some of this talk around contracts. Let me tell you, I have a problem with what the WNBA did, because this is collective bargaining. If you think it creates an unfair advantage, that's what you work out. If the players opt out of the next CBA, you negotiate that in collective bargaining. You can't go back and say, well, we think it does. And even if that's your position, if the CBA doesn't prohibit it, then you can't, do something to block it. Like, that would be
Yeah. And
problematic.
I don't think they will. And I don't think that they'll be able to, because I think what they'll find is that these, negotiations align with the CBA. Like
I
you
get
mentioned,
that.
the team
I get
wasn't
that.
involved. Yeah. So
I
I
do,
think,
but that's not my issue. My issue is these are very poor optics, as you stated. They're very
yeah.
bad optics. And I have to wonder what prompted this in terms of you wanting to look into it. Were there other owners complaining? Because we see this in other leagues all the time. And we've seen it in the WNBA, where one owner wanted to get charter flights and the other owners didn't. And they basically came together to stop that effort and sanctioned the owner of the New York Liberty. So,
Mhm.
and then I also have to wonder if the city of Indianapolis came around and said, "Oh, we want to give, sponsorships to all of the players on the Indiana Fever," would this be the same reaction? Or would I see celebrations and excitement because Caitlin Clark got her teammates paid? I'm just saying, I don't understand the optics. If we're trying to say invest in women, and that's the whole reason you're trying to get the TV deal and get more money, why would you initiate an investigation for sponsorships that are investing in women? It seems counterintuitive to what the goal is of growing the league. And I think for the people who are outraged by this investigation, that's what the outrage is about. It's like, why are you doing this? And this question that we have at the bottom, why is the WNBA investigating the Las Vegas Aces? It does not convey the contempt that I feel, it just states that question. But I was disgusted by this. I'm offended by this. And as a lawyer who conducted investigations, I'm very offended by it, because an investigation isn't the first step. You can do a quiet inquiry and get the details of how this happened. And let's say there are owners objecting. You go back and say, hey, this was on the up and up. We understand your concerns. It's something we have to take up in the CBA. But when you put it out there that there's an investigation, even if they come back and say there's no wrongdoing and the sponsorships stand, you've already cast this cloud over the organization. So the fact that it will stand, to me, doesn't really matter. It's what you did, the optics of it, Callie.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge issue just with the league right now. Like, I mean, I don't know if we'll get a chance to talk about charter flights today, but we struggle with that. I think as people who watch the WNBA, who support the WNBA, you keep seeing these decisions be made that you can't quite defend, that don't make sense, that are often disappointing. And so I think that this is an example of that. You asked, how do you think that, or how is it possible that, it even got to this point? Like, was it an owner? Was it a coach? It was so interesting because obviously, like you mentioned, this news broke during a game, a win over the Los Angeles Sparks in Las Vegas. And so Kurt Miller was asked about, the investigation after the game. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I watch film. I'm happy that the game is growing. Like he did not have any aversion to these sponsorships with the Aces. And so that's not to say that no coach had a problem with it or no owner did, but generally the sense is positive, for this sponsorship. You mentioned that like fans were really excited to see the investment. I can tell you the LVCBA was so excited. That's why I think some of the messaging might have been a little bit inaccurate when he was speaking to the players. Like, yes, there's contract language that says, you got to agree to mutually agreeable appearances and things like that to support the city of Las Vegas, boost tourism, wear gear, things like that. But like people now, I guess because of the WNBA's choice to investigate are like, well, he said this and that sounds like a breach of the CBA. So it's definitely disappointing to see something that could have been so positive take a negative turn because of choices from the league. And you have to wonder, like, is it a media thing? Like, did they get questions from reporters, from fans or whatever, and that's what prompted them to just have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, we're investigating? Like, that does not seem like the normal steps. Like you mentioned, like you could do a quiet inquiry, you could do all these things that don't jump to investigation. There's definitely a negative connotation that puts, a lot of pressure. The last investigation that the league conducted into the Aces required like 40 different individuals to be made available for interviews and things like that. Like this is now a distraction for the team when it shouldn't have been. And so that's my biggest thing.
Yeah, Callie, here's the thing. Literally, the reason why certain businesses don't even use the word investigation is because of how loaded it is. We say in the labor and employment world often, I'm conducting a fact finding, right? Like, we literally, sometimes it depends on the entity, but don't even use the word investigation because of how loaded it is. And the reason I was sort of like rolling my eyes and an annoyance when you were talking about what he said in the video is because I don't care what he said in the video. Like, that's for fans to misunderstand, not the league, who is filled with astute business people and lawyers. Like, we understand in a video, he can't break down contract details and say, well, the players have to do this and have to do that. That was PR messaging. Like, what are we doing? So I'm not giving them a pass because of what he said. Like, fans may be confused. People that don't understand sponsorships and negotiations and that kind of stuff may be confused. But the league is not confused by this. And I mean, I'm sorry, unless you think the Aces are complete morons, after everything that happened last year, being surrounded in controversy, the last thing that they would want to do is do something, suspect that would then call for more investigation. So I say shame on the league because it's really ridiculous. And look, I'm upset about it and others are, but the players had some very strong reactions, right? So Chelsea Gray says like under investigation is crazy, but it is Alicia Clark's response, Callie. She says, can we investigate Kathy? That is the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert. Can we investigate Kathy in her decision on who is allowed to charter and who isn't? So you said, can we talk about charter flights? Yes, let's talk about it. Because the reaction to this investigation news was for the players to bring up the charter flight situation. And I find that interesting because I had some conversations last week with Megan Hall, and people were very critical of us, saying we should just be thankful, appreciate that charter flights are here, all of that kind of stuff. But clearly it is not just my observation and Megan's and WNBA Twitter's if Alicia Clark is tweeting like that. And she wasn't the only one. Brittany Sykes also tweeted about the charter flight situation, not in relation to this quote unquote investigation, but they were going to be traveling. And she says charter flights are given to teams with long, complicated travel. Before May 21st, we leave May 20th for LA. So this is the May 21st deadline she's referring to is when they say, not a deadline, but that date she's referring to is when the league says all the teams will get charter flight access. So they're leaving a day before to go to LA, but they're not flying charter. DC to LA, 5+ hour flight. Indy to Connecticut, 1.5 hour flight. No shade, just really interested in the reasoning. But it is shade, right? No shade, but we know what that is. So, I mean, look, Callie, we talked about, when I say we, me and Megan Hall talked about this in depth, but I'm just curious, what do you make of the players tweeting and making these kinds of posts like this about the commissioner, about the league, and how they're handling charters?
To be quite frank, I think that it's clear that there's a growing sense of frustration, but my hope is that this will transition into actual action. Like, you have a players association for a reason. I am really hoping that they'll make a statement soon. I'm hoping that there will be some action taken by the WNBPA, because that's what it's for. Like, if you, there are lots of questions I think to be had about charter flights and the way that this whole situation is being navigated. I mean, I was looking through the WNBA's announcement about charter flights right before we started this call, and I was reading at the bottom about how these charter flights for 2024 are being sponsored by Delta, which means like maybe the WNBA is putting money towards it, but this is a sponsorship, right? And so it notes at the bottom that the $75 million that the WNBA raised, which we keep hearing about in conversations about the league, are being used apparently for other things. That's what the announcement makes it seem like. They say, the $75 million, it's being used for marketing, it's being used for this. So as a players association, like, maybe you ask for clarity on that. Like, you have a union, for a reason. Like, the tweets I think are good for fans to kind of get a sense of how players are feeling. But the reality is that Kathy Engelbert doesn't care about a tweet from Alicia Clark, most likely, even though we do, right? Like, we care. But does that gonna make Kathy Engelbert make any changes? Is that gonna make WNBA executives, take action? So I think I'm kind of looking at the Players Association like, all right, now, what now? Like, I want to know what happens to that $75 million. Why are these choices being made? How are you going to reckon with the fact that you are, continuously emphasizing the importance of not allowing there to be a competitive, unbalance in terms of advantage, but you're enabling that and the choices that you're making for who can fly charter and who can't? Like, those are big questions. That's why you have a players association. That's also why you have reporters and things like that. And I'm going to try to ask those questions and get those answers. But I think that that's really the next step. Like, I love a tweet. I do, but I want to see some action, some movement.
Absolutely. But I do think tweets like that are where it starts. And I mean,
Absolutely.
Brianna Stewart, who I think is a much bigger name than both of those players, while she didn't go as hard as Alicia and Brittany did, she sort of also called out the league in a more polite way and basically said, you kind of didn't handle this properly. In nice words, though. She said that, basically that's a win that two teams got this, but it would be a bigger one if the W allowed teams who were not offered league charters to secure their own until a full 12-team solution is ready, right? And you have the league MVP doing that. And so I appreciate the tact in which she handled it, but the optics don't look good. And if the league continues to operate like this, I think it is going to become a thing, right? It is going to become a thing because you can't keep making decisions that appear like you're favoring a particular player, a particular team, and eventually it's not going to come to a head. So I'm going to leave it there because, like I said, we talked about this already in depth last week. But, man, the league, like, they are just blowing some of their wins. They're blowing some of their wins. It's like a win, but not really. And we shouldn't have to keep qualifying all of these wins. Callie Lawson Freeman, thank you so much.
Thank you.